I'm Tyler Epson, and this is what the fuck's on my mind. She-Hulk and Wakanda Forever. One's a movie, one's a television show. Both are epically unimpressive circle jerks at best. Now, I know that me and the fucking mass that is the internet are just getting to know each other. And while I am and always have been an amateur ranter with the potential and drive to go pro, I have also moonlighted as an absolutely unknown TV and film critic in the bar and weed smoke filled basement circuit. And I've been thinking lately, what would be better than me not only giving you my unwanted opinions of society in general, but also the trivial differences about what we like in visual entertainment? So let's begin. For well over a decade, we've been immersed in the ocean that is the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And as a whole, considering its best strides, it's been a worthwhile investment from both the casual viewer and those who had a much more intimate knowledge of the source material. However, at the end of phase 3 with Avengers Endgame, the reality of idea burn has become quite apparent in the minds of Marvel creators. And for the last year, Marvel's been dumping out half baked ideas at the pace of pink eye spreading at a kid's pool party. We've endured a lukewarm kung fu flick, the backwash that is the Eternals, the cat turd in the dish of beluga caviar called WandaVision, and Spider-Man reminding us that Marvel can still be good if it sticks with what works and stops trying to get high off the fumes of its own ass residue. I do recognize there have been many an asshole bigger than me that have made basically the exact same comments, but I like to think part of my appeal is to be the last person to speak on something and still say it better than most of you jagoffs. We are now in the twilight of phase 4. And while we've been graced with Werewolf by Night in the Guardians of Galaxy Christmas special, the real final two batters in the MCU lineup were She-Hulk and Wakanda Forever. And in baseball, the last two people to bat are generally the worst hitters on the team. To use another sports analogy, these are the 1-2 punch of the final reason to not care about the MCU going forward. And it's not like a lot of us were on the fence about this shit in the first place. And that's the point of this video, to give you my late ass take on the final two nails in the coffin of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Both suffer from ham-fisted and rushed setups. In Wakanda Forever, T'Challa dies off film unceremoniously. And She-Hulk becomes She-Hulk before 10 minutes has passed, but not before presenting you with the most pathetic stereotypical group of predatory men alive. For a second, I'd like to expand my thoughts on how truly shit the Wakanda Forever opening was, considering the circumstances. Chadwick Boseman's death should have been the end of the Black Panther franchise, in my opinion, as crazy as that may sound. Kind of the whole samurai cherry blossom thing. Read a fucking book if you don't know what I'm talking about. Boseman's untimely demise could have allowed the first Black Panther film to exist in a bubble that it left alone would have put it in a legendary status, even if it was not as phenomenal and groundbreaking as the initial reviews and reception would lead you to believe. Particularly in a situation where the second Black Panther film has the last threads of the Avengers storyline as far as we're aware for now. But Marvel did what you would expect any major film company to do: find whatever remains they could pull from the carcass that is the MCU and serve it on up. Pretty ironic considering that's how slaves were fed in America. They could have easily opened this film with a CGI version of the Black Panther dying fighting a villain, which would have given the characters much more motivation than the deep fried vomit that Marvel tried to give us. Or at least some incident where he's trying to save people. But nope, Black Panther might as well have died of rabies. Way to fucking go. She-Hulk doesn't suffer from the same nostalgia bait. It just thinks it doesn't have to give you that classic protagonist with special abilities set up. Because this show is smarter than you, fuckwad. Didn't you know? From the beginning of the first episode, She-Hulk is She-Hulk, and she is awesome. Which would be enough if you're just trying to do an irreverent comedy that shits on the status quo. But it fails because it still wants to be Marvel content, and it has to fit that paradigm. And that is why you get stuck watching two CGI created monstrosities playing anything you can do, I can do better during the first episode, because the creators still needed it to succeed as a Marvel show. And in the nicest way I could put this, they could not do it. In the meanest way I could put it, they gave us a 4-layer cake made of cancer tumors. Both have shit character development. The difference is that Shuri in Wakanda Forever is just undeveloped and mostly the story just happens to her. Jennifer Walters, on the other hand, is arguably one of the most unlikable characters in the MCU. Her whole condescending, better than everyone, smarter than everyone shtick gets old really fast, and there's nothing about her that really endears you to her. And what little attempt there is with She-Hulk getting the attention that Jennifer doesn't and really craves gets squandered because she uses her abilities for shallow and self-serving reasons, mainly to get attention and laid, which is the bulk of this fucking show. Neither of these projects shit the bed entirely, but the sparks of promise they do have get drowned in a sea of ineptitude. Or you could say they do shit the bed, they're just peanuts in the shit. Both have plots and concepts that objectively have potential, but the end results are these bloated, convoluted messes. And both are epically fucking boring. And things can be bad, but they should never be boring. But I will give Wakanda Forever more of a pass because with the death of Chadwick Boseman, they were painted into a corner from the start. However, that's no excuse for the turd in the beer pitcher they dropped. She-Hulk is much more egregious in terms of poor execution because it all at once tries to be a superhero-based law comedy that breaks the fourth wall, and it does none of that well. This show is full of banter, but bantry and funny are not the same thing. Though I will say a second viewing forces me to admit some bits work better than I first thought. And I get it's supposed to be in sitcom format, so cohesion is not really a high priority. But this show knows that because of the nature of its property, it's supposed to have something resembling a story arc. It just doesn't want to fucking do it, which is ironic if you consider the fact that the creator of She Hulk also created Pickle Rick, a story about a pompous asshole that goes ridiculously far out of his way to avoid doing what's expected of him. It's also the most nothing lawyer show of all time, as the few cases She Hulk has don't do anything to demonstrate her superior legal aptitude, and the other cases she's not directly involved with are mediocre at best. This show is a lawyer show simply because legal cases are played out and it takes place largely in a law firm. A perfect example of this is episode 4. Wong is suing a fake magician for using the mystical arts in his bullshit show. Wong's claim is that what Donnie Blaze is doing could jeopardize the mortal plane. Why the fuck would that require litigation? Scarlet Witch is running around altering reality in WandaVision, but you get all Judge Judy on this goofy motherfucker. While episode 5 is probably the best at crystallizing the potential the show had, it's mostly a blip in the radar. And episode 8 ends up being guilty of using Daredevil like a set of keys being jingled in front of an infant. Then going on to set up the dumb fuckingest last episode of anything in the history of writing, including My Little Pony fan fiction. What ultimately ends up happening is they give you a weak as fuck standard comic book story that they minimally set up, then it basically ignores it except for the few times it thinks it's subtly dropping you breadcrumbs, but just happens to have the same effect of a neon sign saying, hey, dipshit, this is going to be important later. And this show was a ripoff of Harvey Birdman, also attorney at law, who took zany cases from already popular fictional characters. What are the fucking chances? Wakanda Forever's biggest sin is that it's boring. And as I stated before, a boring film is 10 times worse than a bad one. This just happens to nail the landing at being both. Namor has the worst bad guy motivation of anything I have ever seen. This asshat tries to bully Wakanda into helping him, basically because they both have vibranium, and for some reason they should co-sign mermaid bullshit. And Riri Williams serves as nothing more than a MacGuffin. She's just a character with a convenient story arc that lets you see how much of a badass she is without really letting you know anything about her. She doesn't make the movie worse. She just doesn't make it better at all, and really just adds to a runtime that drags like a maxi pad stuck to your shoe. And everything else about this film is just meandering, bland, and a big old bag of who cares. Wakanda Forever is boring because it's bloated like a termite queen. She-Hulk is more like a straight-to-DVD sequel of Mean Girls. This brings us to the biggest problem I have with both of these. They're both very pandering. I think that both think that they're trying to address concepts that have parallels in real life. Yes, women still face uphill battles fighting the old boy system that is the corporate world. Yes, continents inhabited by indigenous people have been exploited by fair skinned folk carrying guns and smallpox. And I get that Marvel's trying to be less formulaic and do things outside of the whole white male power fantasy, but it is possible to do that without talking down to your audience or trying to placate a demographic of people that are generally underrepresented in media. And let me be absolutely clear, I'm not talking about all stories that speak to the experiences of people of different cultures, ethnicities, backgrounds, or persuasions. I am condemning those things that push subpar content out and hide behind the shield of, well, it speaks to your group, so you have to like it. That being said, black folk, when it comes to comic book stuff, we ain't entirely been left out of the loop. The difference is that She-Hulk's only real crime in this regard is trying to push this whole all girls are boss, men are not douchebaggy narrative. Wakanda Forever, even unknowingly, just tries to still give you those positive reflections of black people that end up being just as stereotypical as JJ from Good Times or Smokey from Friday. Both of which are characters I fuck with, but if I'm gonna be honest, they're gonna be the first two people mentioned when I'm sitting in a bar next to some asshole trying to let me know that he watches shows that Negroes are on. Part of what I'm getting at is as a black man that's a huge fan of literature and film, I can like something that doesn't have one fucking blackface in it. And likewise, just because you shove black images and bullshit content doesn't mean I'm gonna give it a pass. I hate Tyler Perry movies, not because I'm some Sambo. To me, watching his films is the equivalent of eating a box of generic grocery store brand fish sticks. I only fuck with it because there's no other option and I will regret it every step of the way. The only difference is a Tyler Perry flick won't pour out of my asshole like coffee from a Keurig machine 4 hours later. Or will it? And to tell the truth, I am sick of being expected to co sign half assed content just because the protagonists share my skin color. Old man Tyler's too complicated a soul for that honus. As the reigning king of the last man to speak on things, I truly feel that these two projects are the death knell of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I say that understanding this is a franchise that will never truly fail because the powers that be will never allow that to happen. But considering the fact that Disney Marvel has pretty much exhausted all the IPs they do have, and the ones that they don't, if and when they get them, being Fantastic Four, X-Men, and Spider-Man, no one's really expecting them to do anything less than fuck those up either. So it's hard to make the argument that Marvel will ever be able to get back to the heights that they once were at. And if you need proof of that, please look at the Phase 5 lineup and tells me what exactly makes your fun parts tingle. And ironically, I have a hard time looking at the franchise as a whole and not being reminded of the myth of Icarus. With the lesson being, the more you try to push your limits with no regard for the realities of your situation, the more likely you are to plummet to your demise. But hey, rich people like more money, regular people like shiny shit and explosions, and I will always need something to call stupid as fuck. Old man Tyler out.